So, as a prospective judge, what do you consider your greatest strengths and weaknesses?
I like to think I don't really have any weaknesses, but my greatest strengths, I think, are the time that I spent in private practice. I've worn every hat there is to wear. I've prosecuted cases, I've defended cases, I've served as a guardian ad litem. I've been involved in many cases over that time that I was in private practice. I prosecuted many cases in the 2 years I was an assistant DA. So I think the width and breadth of my experience gives me a better insight into people.
Your lengthy experience, what is your greatest accomplishment that you've had in the legal field?
Well, in the legal field, I would say being able to be appointed to be a district court judge. I've run unopposed every time. I was appointed in 2007. I ran unopposed in 2008, in 2012, and 2016. The legislature made these matters partisan elections again. I believe that's the only reason I've got opposition now is because they're partisan. But I think that that's probably my greatest, my personal experiences, my greatest experiences is raising two wonderful children of my own and helping to raise my stepson, who's a freshman at Appalachian right now through all the COVID mess. But that and the involvement I've had in my community just kind of as a whole. I was a youth counselor at First Methodist for many years, went on a bunch of mission trips from Mississippi to Michigan to New York to Toledo, Ohio. So I think that's my greatest accomplishment. I think it's my kids and the work that I've tried to do with kids and to help them move on to more productive lives.
Why should voters, support you rather than your opponent?
Well, my opponent has been nothing but an assistant district attorney here. He's stayed entirely in that office. He's never practiced law. He's never run an office. He's never made a payroll. He's never had to hire or fire an employee. He has not had clients per se. The state has the state's the entity that the DA represents. Though they're victims that they talk to and officers and things of that sort. But it's not the same dynamic as when you're actually representing that individual in their capacity as an individual. And again, I've got 40 plus years of wearing every hat there is to wear, and I think that gives me clearly an experience level that he can't come close to.
I'm glad to hear about that new court system that they're setting up. That's going to be interesting to
The,
see.
the court, the drug court, the statistics showed when I still don't know why the legislature wanted to get rid of it, but the drug court, for every dollar spent, it saved $7 that was being spent someplace else because it put things under one roof and you could really keep up with things and solidify services. We're going to have a new, the domestic violence resource center hopefully is opening in the next year or so that'll put everything under one roof so that when people in that situation come in, it's not like, well, here's the papers from here. You need to go down to so and so other side of town and talk to Joe Blow, and then come back up next Thursday and talk to John. And it's all right in one place where people can consolidate services, and they'll be able to. It's just sort of a clearinghouse for everything. I think that's going to really help things too. So that's coming. That's not here yet, but I think that's going to make those cases a lot easier for us to handle and to get people the help that they need.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a great resource for our county.
We'll
So
be one of the few that has it, so we're really excited for that to be coming.
you answered this a little bit in our last question, but if you want to go into more detail, what do you perceive as the greatest obstacle to justice, if any?
Well, justice is a big word. As far as getting your cases heard in court, I talked to a friend yesterday whose daughter lives in Greensboro. She's trying to get child support from her ex-husband, and she's been trying for almost a year to get a hearing. I believe here we're really good about making court time available. Judge Jackson and I particularly are willing to, we'll take cases on a day when we might not. We do have a few courts where you have a few off days where you can take care of personal things and go to the doctor and stuff like that. But if those times are not spoken for, we try to plug into that. And sometimes you start a case and you can't get through. There's just not enough time to finish it. So instead of throwing it all away, you just say, hold it right there. And I try to find a time when the parties and or their attorneys can come back and try to get that resolved. But look, availability of court time is a big obstacle. Money, of course, is an obstacle for folks. Attorneys are pretty expensive, but we've got a really good PD's department. We used to have a great program I helped set up back in the early 80s when we had 3 staff attorneys. Legal aid was then Legal Services of the Southern Piedmont, and their office was in Charlotte, and I think there was a 6 or 7 county area that they covered. And the 3 staff attorneys all walked out the same day and said, we're going into private practice with somebody down the street. No warning, no time to plan or do anything. So there's an attorney in town named Bill Moore. Dolph Sumner's an attorney here. Rob Sumner, who was the Superior Court judge, who's now retired, and several other people got together and said, well, we need to do something to fix this. So we came up with what we called the Pro Bono Project. We just did it on our own. We set up for people that were willing to take cases for folks that couldn't afford an attorney but really needed one. And that ultimately, the directorate, LSSP, asked if we would allow the program to be taken in under their auspices, their tutelage. And we had a wonderful director that oversaw that, got people to, whoops, what happened? Oh, I don't know. I think my wife got a phone call. So, and I'm on her computer. That's why it says Stephanie Ellett down there instead of me.
It's fine.
But it really helped with that. And it went on. Becky Lauder was the coordinator that did that. Now that has kind of gone by the wayside. Legal aid keeps having budget cuts more and more and more. Everything has to go through Raleigh now. There's very little. They've got some attorneys here, but there's very little local presence. So more money seems to help everything. More money for that sort of thing would help. But I think those are not being able to afford an attorney or to find an attorney can be a big obstacle as well. I think those are probably the biggest ones, is just plain being able to get into court and then having good help when you get there.
All right. That's a good answer. So in the era of hate crimes, what are some issues in balancing, what are the issues in balancing free speech rights against the need to control offensive activity?
Well, all of those matters we heard in Superior Court. I don't hear any crimes of that sort, but it seems to me there is a balance between, as I think Oliver Wendell Holmes said, it's you can't shout fire in a crowded theater. It's okay to say fire, but don't say it there. You have to balance the consequences of what people say, and of course, we know there's lots of that going on in the world now, and the internet makes it possible to be totally anonymous and say outrageous things and just say all sorts of things. But the legislative intent is to, and that's in federal crimes as well, is to try to put a stop on things that I think that are just really outrageous. But again, I've had no real experience with those. I never represented anybody charged with a hate crime in my time, and those statutes are relatively recent, but of course, where people are targeted for their race or their religion or their sexual orientation or, just what they look like, it just seems like there's more problems with that than there's ever been before. But I think the statutes as they're drawn, I think fairly balance that, or at least they're intended to. But again, I don't have a lot of experience with that.
That's fine. Your answer was just fine and knowledgeable for what you know.
Okay, thank you.
Do you believe in the composition of juries adequately and fairly reflects on society at large?
Well, this sounds like a cop-out. It's not. I haven't tried a jury trial in about 6 years. Judge Lands here's all of our jury trials in district court. Now, obviously, when I tried cases, The jury pool, I believe, is pulled from voter records and from driver's license registrations. They had to come up with something. I don't know of a more. It has to be something that's not arbitrary, but it's done by just random drawing of a computer pulling a name. I do think we've tried to, and I was watching. My wife particularly is a huge fan of Ruth, and we watched with her death last week. We've just been really distressed by that, and we went back and watched the CNN special about her again, and it just reminds you that you have to constantly be looking at things like that, and she always was willing to push the status quo. I remember there was a time, of course, when you couldn't have a woman on your jury, and they were mostly white men, and I don't think they look like that anymore. But again, the base they draw from, that I think that's statutorily created, and that'd be the place to change it. But I haven't seen any idea that really anybody really tries to keep anybody out of the jury pool. Now, 40 years ago, you would see a lot more of that than you see now. But I think the way they do it is you have to pick some way to be able to just randomly select people. And again, I got picked for federal jury duty one time, and I think state jury duty twice, and I couldn't do it any of those times. I would love the experience of sitting on the jury. I'd love to know what it looks like inside that room, and what people bring with them, and what they want to talk about.
Yeah, I want to sit on a jury. I haven't had the chance. I've been called, but I was dismissed.
Well, much of the jury trial, we don't really have that many jury trials here anymore. Now, civil court has dropped off a lot because the average personal injury case is just about impossible to win. Insurance companies have just got it in everybody's minds that you're going to affect your own insurance premiums, and they're very aggressive in defending them. They'll stipulate negligence, but they won't stipulate causation of any injury. So it takes a really strong case to do any good with that. And over time, the numbers of those types of cases have dropped off. And civil superior for years, it's been they might go for one day and then they convert over to hearing. They have plenty of criminal cases scheduled for those sessions, so they can bring another case in there and be trying two criminal cases at once. But the vast majority of stuff now, we've got fast tracking and plea weeks that they set up, and the way things run, most folks don't ask for a jury trial. It takes an awful long time. It's a risky thing depending on what kind of an offer you're made to resolve the cases against you. So, and there's been a big push towards alternative dispute resolution with not having people in court in the first place. Hopefully, through mediation and other programs like that, that they can resolve the issues that way. So juries have changed a lot in the time that I've been doing this. But I think, again, you got to pick a basis to select folks to do it.
Yeah.
And that's as fair as anything I can think of.
Mm-hmm. Right. What are factors that are considered in granting and setting bail amounts for defendants?
Well, what I look at mostly is danger to the community. Do they have a record of coming to court or not coming to court? Do they have any record at all? How serious was the offense? What's the likelihood that they might, again, with past record or depending on perhaps substance abuse and things of that sort? And obviously the severity of the crimes, well, not only the nature of it, but the severity of it that might make somebody willing to pack their bags and try to disappear into the night. But I try to weigh all those factors carefully and really with the heaviest emphasis on protecting the public and making sure that you have to be fair to the person, but you got to look after the best interests of the public as well.
All right.
I know there's a lot of talk about revamping the whole bail system. I know there's been a great deal of discussion about that, and I don't think it's anywhere near over yet. But the way the statute is drawn now, if you've got a prior felony pending and you get a new felony charge, you have to be given a secured bond. There's no unsecured bond option. That's just what the law says you have to do. We have a great resource here in pretrial services that they interview people. I'm in jail cases this week in courtroom 2D. They bring up a report for anybody that they think would qualify for that kind of treatment. They do drug and alcohol screens. They monitor people. If they need a GPS monitor, they've got a system to set that up and they can tell where people are. And those kinds of things make it a lot easier to not necessarily have to set a secured bond for somebody, that there's somebody that's going to kind of keep up with them and make sure they don't, hopefully not get in any more trouble. And that's a great resource. We've had that resource for a long, long time. And it not only is fair to people, but it saves the taxpayers an awful lot of expense as well. Staying in jail is an expensive proposition. It's like, I think $70 a day, I think, or $71 a day that it costs the county to incarcerate somebody. And, you just try to find that delicate balance between protecting the public and looking after the individual. And each case stands and falls on its own facts.
Right. What do you believe are the causes of the high rates in minority incarceration?
This probably applies across the board. I think probably the greatest problem is lack of opportunity. Drugs are just so rampant and everywhere, everybody, everywhere. We were talking after court today that if we didn't have a drug problem, we probably wouldn't need a lot of I know we wouldn't need a lot of the courts that we have, but I think that seems to go with it as lack of employment, lack of opportunity for employment. And I think those are the things that probably drive that the most. That's what I see, and those always seem to be the recurring problems: is lack of good employment, lack of education, and things of that sort, which are all things, of course, we try to remedy. But if they're, to the extent that that issue exists, I think those are the biggest reasons for it.
Okay. Do you believe there is a such thing as a victimless crime? And if so, what offenses would you place in that category?
Well, we talk about some drug offenses being victimless, but when you consider what drugs do in other parts of society, it may not hurt that person, but if you're contributing to particularly organized crime, the kind of money that they make running marijuana, but that funds other drugs too. So, and I don't get to express an opinion as to that. Really, the legislature is one that decides that sort of thing, but I'm not sure there is such a thing. We see assault cases all the time where the people say, look, we were just having an argument. But then again, you see folks, particularly women, get killed all the time. It just turns into really bad things. I'm not really sure there is a victimless crime in the sense of, as to the individual, not so much, but as to the overall effect it has on our society and on the community. I really don't think there is. But I don't, again, that's just a personal opinion. I can't express that opinion as a judge. So the legislature decides what the punishments are and whether something is illegal or not.
Okay.
Or
Well,
the federal
going back
government. The government's responsible for that.
going
They
back
didn't ask me
to
what I thought before they decided what to do. So
going back to you speaking about drug crimes, how do you feel about the war on drugs and if it's been effective or ineffective in your opinion?
again, that's something I don't know that I can really express an opinion about that. We're limited, and as judges, we don't get to opine too much about things except the matters that are before us. We don't get to comment on other cases or whether something right or wrong happened. But I don't know. Drugs don't seem to be stopping any, from what I can tell. We see just more and more of it. I heard of the drug called Molly. I had never heard of that before yesterday. I had a woman come in whose husband had threatened to kill her and their children, and she said and apparently that's whatever the ingredient is in ecstasy, but that's what he said he was taking, and he was just out of his mind from it. It doesn't seem like it's stopping anything very much. We have so many crystal meth is just such a plague. opium. I mean, heroin's back. Heroin almost disappeared until I guess if you want to call it the opioid crisis, till people could no longer get prescription drugs. Heroin is very similar in the effect that it has on prescribed pain medications, and it's cheap and it's readily available. There was a at my Rotary Club last year, and I can't remember the young man's name, but he lived in Cramerton. His parents were, I think, his mother was a doctor, and her father was just really well educated, smart, well-to-do people. Their son, he went to Carolina to get a master's degree. I can't remember what it was in, but he got hurt when he was 16. I think he broke his leg. And unbeknownst to them, since that time, he'd been addicted to hydrocodone and other prescription pain meds, and he couldn't get it anymore. And he bought some heroin over in Charlotte off the street that was tainted very heavily with fentanyl, and he died. I mean, fentanyl is just a deadly drug, just the tiniest amount. Is far more powerful than heroin is. So it just seems to be every place. I don't know whether we're doing any good with it or not.
Yeah, I think that the opioid crisis has shone light that it can hit anywhere.
Well, it can. And again, the drug court that we're starting and that we had before, you try to look at the entire family unit, and that's the way to approach it. And we talk about, I do believe that people need treatment more than they need punishment, but sometimes that person's got to want to change, or you can go to all the treatment in the world, and if you're resisting it, the rate of success is very low, even when people really want to change. Some of those drugs are just really powerful. They alter the way their brains work, from what the science I've heard in court says. So it's really a hard habit to break when you get on the hard stuff, particularly.
Yeah, that is true also from everything that I've read. Do you believe that there is an underrepresentation of women of color or people of color in the court system?
Well, I'll say this, it certainly has picked up a great deal in the last 20 years. The composition of our clerk's office, of the bar, far more women, far more women than we used to have, and far more black women than we used to have, and black males. I think, I'm not sure if you would necessarily say underrepresented. Possibly some people have chosen to go other routes, I guess, to try to have a career. The legal field is pretty overloaded right now with when Charlotte School of Law was cranking out 1,000 graduates a year. It kind of flooded the market here, but I definitely see a great improvement in that. And then all the agencies that work within the courthouse, probation, clerks, sheriff's department, police department, all of them far better represented with people of color and with women. I think it's a good thing. I've never seen anybody in any of those positions where, and I try to not think about what their race is or what their sex is. Everyone I've seen can do the job, and that's really all that matters. But I do think it may not be enough yet, but it's far better than it used to be. And I think we have a very receptive community towards that. The legal community is very much so, and I think the courthouse is as well.
I agree. I don't think that I see this issue in Gaston County, particularly from all the people I've known in the justice
I
system.
mean, in any courtroom you walk into, there's a great chance you have a woman bailiff. You might have a black woman bailiff. You have a female attorneys of all races. So I really believe we're across the board within the courthouse and the sheriff's department and law enforcement. I think women and people of color are very well represented. Not to say that it's enough. I mean, Ruth said, "How many women on the Supreme Court is enough?" She said, "Well, we haven't had 9 yet." So I guess that just depends on your personal beliefs. But I don't think, I think we're very open to that. And I think it makes us a much better legal community because we do that.
Yeah, I agree. So let's see. Do you believe that all citizens have adequate access to legal help? You answered this a little bit with your
Yeah, money's always an issue with that. Attorneys are quite expensive most of the time. We don't have a whole lot of, I wish the legal aid could be expanded more. They don't do domestic cases as it is. And that's what we started doing when the volunteer lawyer program got started through legal aid. That's what we aimed at was domestic cases because that's where the greatest need is. People that have children, they can't get child support, they can't get a custody order done because they can't afford the money it takes to get an attorney to come to court. We make a lot more things available in the way of self-help. Legal aid does classes from time to time, and they give out forms. We have forms at the courthouse. The AOC has just put a whole new section online for people to be able to do their own pleadings interactive with a PDF and print it out, and it looks like a real court document instead of a piece of paper that's been copied to where the stuff's crooked and you're just writing on it with a pen. But that's the greatest obstacle I think is that people just don't have the money and there just are not enough people that are willing to do that. I tried to help people lots of times that couldn't afford to pay what it took. I usually did domestic cases on a flat fee. Everything's done by the hour now, and you have to pay up front, and they bill against it, and it just really creates a problem to get attorneys sometimes. And if we could do anything, it would be to have more pro bono work being done and more avenues for people. Now, the mediation program is a big help. I have lots of people in the last several months. Both sides come in unrepresented. Neither one of them can afford an attorney, but they can go through mediation. And if they can work out an agreement, then the mediation office prepares an order, so to speak, from what they've agreed to, a parenting agreement about what they've agreed to do. And a judge signs it and makes it a court order. So we've not always had that. So I think that helps some. But I really believe money and just availability of attorneys is the biggest obstacle for people.
all right. Do you have any instances where you faced ethical dilemma?
I don't remember any particularly in my private practice. It would have been somebody wanting me to represent them that I couldn't, either because of the relationship or I had represented someone else that would conflict with it. Prior to that, I struggle with it now. I've had a number of former clients that will pop up and I say, and I remember that person, but I don't even remember what I did for them. And I'll let them decide if they think, I said, I don't think my representing in the past will affect what I would do. But if there's any question about it, I always recuse myself and let someone else hear it. So it's just better to avoid even the appearance of impropriety. And that's what lawyers have to keep at the front of their minds is that it needs to not look like anything wrong is going on. So always making sure I try to do that. I guess that's the biggest dilemma is when there's somebody there and they're in jail and the case could get resolved and they could go on their way. And recusing myself may add more time to that, but I always try to err on the side of caution when it comes to that.
That's good. So I know you mentioned that your wife loved Ruth, as we all did. Do you have any role models, or maybe Ruth was one of your role
Well,
models?
she definitely was, and I've only really come to know about her. My wife has been she had cancer some years ago when we first started dating, if you wish to call it that. I guess I feel like I'm too old to say that I was dating somebody, but she has been through cancer twice, and she read about Justice Ginsburg and what she went through with her husband when he was sick, what she's gone through with it. And she said, that gives me hope. If she can do it, I know I can too. She's certainly someone anybody could want to emulate and think of as a hero. Locally, I think my biggest hero would have been Harley Gaston. He passed away a few years ago. He was a district court judge for many years. He was on the county commission. He was an attorney in Belmont, and people used to complain that, well, he takes too long. He gets up and goes and gets a book, and we just want him to do something. And I always said, look, if telling me that somebody took the time to make sure they did it right, if that's the only bad thing you can say about them, then you're not saying anything bad about them. And I always valued his advice, and I practiced in front of him for many years. He was no longer a judge when I became a judge. He was forced into retirement. Judges have to retire when they're 72. There's no exceptions. No other office has that requirement. You can be sheriff till you're 100. You can be in the legislature till you're 100. You can be clerk of court till you're 100. You can be chief of police till you're 100, but you can't be a judge after 72. But he was not on the bench when I was on the bench, but he would come in and do fill-in work when people were out sick and things like that. And I just always valued him. He really cared about people. He always bent over backwards trying to be fair, which is what I try to do. And I just think I took a whole lot from what he taught people. And Justice Ginsburg, I admire for her brilliant mind and her willingness to take on what looked like a lost cause. And I think the world is certainly a much better place for all the things that she changed and changed the playing field forever. I don't know how anybody could not feel that way about her. So I really admire and look up to both of them.
Yeah, I think that even if they didn't like her, they are still saddened by her death.
I would hope so. And anybody,
She was a
obviously with, I can never think of her fellow justice that was so conservative and she was so the other way, but they had such love and affection for each other, and he respected her. You can respect her, and if you can't respect her mind and her hard work, then there's something wrong. She didn't, I think, did her best to try to do everything the right way, and I just don't know how anybody could have anything but just great respect and admiration for her.
I agree. While serving on bench, do you believe you have a role in bringing important legal or judicial issues before the public or the legislator? Why?
Well, we're sometimes asked by the legislature to make suggestions. I have never done that. We don't get to get up on a soapbox and talk about things. We sometimes handle cases that are covered by the press, but you don't get to comment on things. I don't get to comment on what some other judge has done or about some matter that might come before me. That brings the legal profession and the bench into disrepute to do that. So we have to carefully avoid that. But again, I think all we are allowed to do, our oath is, I'll be fair, I'll be impartial, I'll follow what the law says, and I'll work hard. That's not really part of it, that you'll work hard, but I've always tried to do that. And I think that's pretty much where it stops. But now there are occasionally we have symposiums, and School of Government will have judicial education functions that they do, and they'll ask about things, and people will comment within that context. It's just generally commenting. It's not necessarily making a public statement, but certain feedback gets done that way. But as far as actually saying this is a big problem that we need to change, it's not proper for me to do that.
What is your vision for the future of our judicial system? What changes would you advocate for?
I'd like for it to be more counsel to be more available to people. Again, what we've talked about with that, and for it to continue to try to meet the needs of the public. That's what, again, Justice Ginsburg said, look, the world's changed whether you admit it or not, or whether you accept that or not. And I just want to see us continue to advance. We have the alternative dispute resolution council in Raleigh that's always trying to find ways for people to resolve issues with that. I mean, it'll be a legal disposition, but it doesn't mean having to file in court and come to court. You can go to a mediation, or you can get in their mediation in criminal cases now where people might be able to resolve the problems they have without having to come to court. I think we'll continue to do more with things like that, more problem-solving courts like drug court. We have a truancy court here that kind of encapsulates the whole family situation. And then with neglect abuse court, we do that as well with folks that are within DSS purview. I would just like to see us continue to make legal resolutions and legal assistance available to people so that we can help good results continue to happen. It's very important for folks, when I've heard this said, and I believe it's true, if you go to court and you lose, if you say that judge listened to me, he was fair, he did what he thought was right, most folks are not upset. But if they feel like they got run over or nobody listened to what they said, or they said, just, just sit down and be quiet, I don't want to hear from you, people don't accept that. And that does a lot of damage to the legal system. It needs to be as available as possible, as readily as possible, and we need to continue to change ways that people can access it. Online access is going to be a lot greater as things go on, which you've never really had before. So anything that makes access to it better, I think is what we have to continue to try to do.
I agree. I think COVID has definitely helped us learn new ways to.
And they work really perfectly well. I think some things are going to change that way, and I think the legislature has looked into trying to do more things like that, and people are doing. My wife is a paralegal with the Roberts Law Firm here, and so they do lots of industrial commission work on workman's comp claims, and they've been doing everything by Zoom or by WebEx since back in early March, I think. And it's not ideal necessarily, but it's a perfectly good way to do things as opposed to not doing anything at all. And I believe we'll continue to see that be explored in new ways to, again, where folks can. There have been some cases where I think trials have been conducted that way for somebody that lived across the country and couldn't afford to fly back here for a custody case or for some other matter. So all those things will just make it more accessible and easier for people to get their matters resolved fairly and to feel like they've gotten a fair shake.
Yep, I agree. So we're coming up on our last 10 minutes. I want to open up the floor for the viewers if they have any questions to send them in the chat.
I'll let you read those. I'll probably disconnect myself if I try to open the chat box.
No, it's fine. So while we wait, I want to ask a few off-topic questions.
Okay.
So if you could have dinner with anyone, dead or alive, who would you choose?
Oh boy. This is going to sound really kind of corny, but I'd like to have dinner with my parents. I would love to be able to talk to them one last time. There have been so many things that have happened since they passed away. I just love to get their advice and their thoughts about it. Now, as far as famous people go, I think probably Abe Lincoln.
Good answer. Why would you choose him?
Because I just think he had a moral character that we haven't seen very many times in the White House. Although he was complained of as violating the legal rights of people doing things that they said you don't have the right to do it. You're making yourself a dictator. But he had power and decided he needed to use it and tried to use it in the right way to make good things happen. And I just would love to. He had a great sense of humor. I'd love to just sit and talk with him. I think he'd be a really fascinating person to listen to and to talk to.
All
FDR
right.
would have been great too.
Yeah, that's a great answer. So do you want to wrap up telling us anything that we maybe missed or that you want to get out or promotion?
Well, I really urge everybody to get out and vote, get your parents to vote, get everybody to know you vote. I have been doing this job a really long time, and I appreciate every opportunity I get to speak to people or to ask for their support. These are not partisan jobs. I heard a judge say on a conference call I was on last week that I've never once asked anybody what their political party was before I ruled in their case. The courts need to be above that, and I'm afraid everything's happening to try to drag it down from that, and I just think that's a bad thing. I've done it for a long time. I've consistently had, when we were doing judicial performance evaluations, I've consistently rated as first or close to first in the county of all district court judges. I like doing it. I think I'm good at it. I've got a good perspective on things. I can only serve one more term, and I'd really like to have the opportunity to do that. And I'll appreciate everybody's support. Everything's been, folks have been so great so far, and I'm proud of all of y'all for organizing and getting ready to do things. There are things that need to be done, and y'all are the hands and feet that are going to be doing it in the future. I've told some folks in recent church meetings I've had that my kids teach me every day about things that, Dad, you shouldn't say that, you shouldn't do that, meaning nothing by some things, but you understand the importance of it. And we all need to always be in school, so to speak, and looking to be better people and better servants and better citizens. And I applaud all of y'all for doing that. This is a great way to do that. And I will be honored to have your vote and to have any support you can give me.
Hey, well, thank you so much for your time. I can't wait to vote for you in November.
Well, I appreciate that very much. If we get back where we can do things in public, I'd love to meet everybody sometime.
We would love to do an in-person
I would
interview with
too.
you.